Presented by Kamuk Ukulele Magazine, this is Ukulele Stories. Aloha, Shawn. Welcome to Ukulele
Aloha.
Stories.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Saying off air, we've been meaning to do this for a while, so good to have you here. You're just a very busy man, it seems, in the Hawaiian ukulele world, which is exactly why we want to talk to you on this podcast. I've always been very interested in history of the instrument, and I feel like a lot of people, not that they're not interested, but they just don't know about it, and they're always interested to find out. But you're doing an incredible job educating people. Why don't we start then with the Hawaiian Music Archives, which is part of the Hawaii State Archives. How did all of that come about?
Well, and thank you for the opportunity to share. This is really under, as you said, the Hawaii State Archives, specifically under the direction of Dr. Adam Jansen. He is our Hawaii State Archivist, and he is tasked with keeping the treasures, all of Hawaii's treasures, which we believe includes music. And so all of Hawaii's greatest documents, when you think of archives, you really think of documents. But the history of the archives is such that it also includes many, many, many artifacts. As a matter of fact, Queen Liliuokalani herself entrusted her own personal items, many of which are artifacts, to the Hawaii State Archives. And so that is kind of the position that they embrace, is that they are the caretakers of Hawaii's not only historical record, but also key artifacts as well. It was about 2.5 years ago or so that there were some donations that were made to the state archives. It was a very famous DJ in Hawaii, Hari D. Soria, who had done a tremendous service to the community, not only sharing Hawaiian music, but he took copious notes. And as a DJ, every single day he would have someone on, or what music he played. He wrote all of this down. And so he had this daily record for like 50 years of his life of what he played, who were the guests, what was going on. And about 6 months or so before he had passed, he was looking for a repository for all of his collection. And he chose the archives. And so that donation became kind of the impetus or point of reflection that Dr. Jansen was saying, well, why don't we have much in terms of, Hawaiian music or history? What memory institutions are retaining this information? A local news station that picked up that story of this generous contribution, and that played here in the islands. A gentleman who used to run, I believe it was Santa Cruz in California, running one of the ukulele festivals there many, many, many years back. But he ran it for a long period of time, very successful. He moved to the Big Island of Hawaii. He had a large collection of instruments himself, as well as sheet music and memorabilia and some of these things. He was living in the area of Puna on the Big Island, which is very damp. Much of this was in the garage. And as a result of that, his wife was saying, hey, this stuff is not doing us any help. It's just deteriorating in the garage. Of course, we want to clean this up. So why not, get rid of this? We're going to sell it or donate it or whatnot. He had seen this recent donation. And as a result of that, he contacted Dr. Jansen. We've been working together for about a little over 2.5 years. At the time, there were no ukuleles in the collection in the state archives. With that first donation came about a little over 120 ukuleles or so, many of which were, kind of lower end instruments. Many of them were, Macaferries or things that needed tremendous repair. Nonetheless, those were the first instruments that came into the collection. And so we went from 0 ukuleles about 2.5 years ago, and now this is a worldwide phenomenon because people are participating from all over the world, which is really exciting, which really is the story of the ukulele. It's an international phenomenon. Here I am in Hawaii talking to you, Cameron, I'm in Sydney, about instruments, on the ukulele, and it's just a beautiful thing. We had just surpassed about 1,000 ukulele in less than 2.5 years.
Wow, incredible.
Yeah, it is a treasure trove of information, and our feeling is not to shape the narrative in any particular way. Our hope is that we just retain and preserve all of this information, including instruments, including sheet music, including methodology books. We have a string research library. We have over 1,000 ukuleles. But really for for access, for education, and for research purposes, so that people can come in and they can do their own research. They can make their own assessments on the history of the ukulele in any particular, you know, field, or even around the world. And that's really our hope. We actually had our first PhD student in ukulele that is working on her PhD come in December of last year. Elizabeth Pfeiffer, you might know of her.
I do.
And she's doing some fantastic work studying the finger style techniques of Ernest Ka'ai, which is considered one of, the first virtuosos of the ukulele. And then we had our second PhD student just come about a week and a half ago, and she's from Malaysia.
Wow.
Yeah, Kelly Tay. But we're trying to put this together for the community, and that is reflective of certainly the community here in Hawaii. There's a Hawaiian word that, the word is kuleana, and I've come to learn, even though I'm from Hawaii, I'm learning about Hawaiian language a little as well, but this term embraces many different concepts, and two of which are responsibility, but it's also privilege. And so for us, that's what we feel, is that we have both the responsibility and the privilege to honor those that came before us, but also to educate our kids and all people who ukulele. So when we talk about community, of course, we're talking about the community in Hawaii, but we're really talking also about the broader community, the diaspora. There's more Hawaiians that live outside of Hawaii than live in Hawaii. And so ensuring that they have a connection to their roots and their understanding of what is in the archives, not only music related things, but all the things there. And same thing with music and ukulele around the world, is that we want this to be accessible to everyone. And we can do certain things online, accessible online, but we're positioning ourselves to have more broad access for people that will be coming in that are here physically as well, including school groups and so forth.
Well, you're kind of lucky it's a small instrument if you've got that many already.
It is, and it's quite the experience to walk in and see a wall full of ukulele.
Oh, the best kind of experience for sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure you mentioned previously that you were thinking of also starting a museum, ukulele museum. Will that be sort of as part of the collection, or will it be a separate entity, sort of not a tourist attraction, but in a way a tourist attraction?
Yes. So there are so many moving parts to this project, but basically having the Hawaiian Music Archives, which resides in the Hawaii State Archives, this is already happening, which means that everything that's in the collection will remain there in perpetuity. And it belongs to the people of Hawaii. So all the donations that we're receiving, some are part purchase, part donation, some are outright purchases, and many are outright donations that are tax deductible for us here in the US. But the Hawaiian Music Archives is happening now, and it will remain there in perpetuity for research and educational purposes. Now, we are working with politicians and helping them raise awareness for the need of a Hawaiian music museum, or an ukulele museum in particular.
Yeah.
In 2015, the state awana instrument, which is a contemporary instrument, became the ukulele. And so we thought, how fitting or how appropriate is it that we should be able to celebrate this instrument? And of course, it's small in stature. People think of the ukulele when they think of Hawaii or the sound of that instrument. And so our long-term objective, yes, is to get to a museum. And so what we're doing now is we are actually gathering all the contents that we will need, in the museum. I'm co-chair along with Jim Tranquata. He's the foremost authority on the history of the ukulele. Fantastic guy. He is a walking encyclopedia of information.
His book with John King is just the Bible
fantastic.
of ukulele, isn't it?
It really is. He and I are co-chairs of this project under Dr. Jansen. But the long-term vision is, yes, to get to an ukulele museum, really for access, for education, and to celebrate the rich history of all of those stories. The story of the ukulele to me is just something that is so beautiful, because I genuinely believe it doesn't belong to a singular ethnic group or singular culture, right? So we have the Madarans who brought the parent instruments to the ukulele, of which there are two. The Madaran machete, which is a 4-string instrument, looks like a soprano-sized ukulele, but it's tuned DGBD historically, or DGBE, and that's one of the two parent instruments. The second parent instrument is called a modern rajao. It's a five-string instrument, and the tuning of that instrument is where the modern day ukulele receives its tuning. So G, C, E, A, but then there's a fifth string on the top, and that's a D string. So it's D, G, C, E, A. And so in essence, what we have is a blend of those two instruments, by which we have this body of the smaller instrument, but the tuning minus the top string, the D string of the larger instrument, and we get our GCEA reentrant tuning. What I love about this instrument is when you look back in the history, it becomes clear and clear quickly that this instrument is a result or is a product of a community of people. And so it was the Madeirans who brought the parent instruments, but it was the Ali'i or the Hawaiian monarchy that championed that instrument, embraced it, and within less than 10 years make that instrument their own. But it was also, the Chinese immigrants that came to Hawaii. We find examples of early Chinese luthiers. When we think of a Chinese-made ukulele, we often think of the giant companies like Kala and Ohana, which exist today, Enya, fantastic companies. But there's a beautiful story about these early Chinese immigrants to Hawaii in the early 20th century that stepped in after the original three makers, Augusto Diaz, Jose do Espirito Santo, and Manuel Nunez, had passed or stopped building, that the second generation of builders emerges. And in large part, many of the business owners, in some instances, the builders themselves were of Chinese ancestors or Chinese immigrants to Hawaii. And they were carrying the heavy lift, as it may be, in creating large quantities of ukuleles that were coming out of the islands, but they were under kind of pseudonames, generic names that would appeal to tourists, such as Waikiki or Ala Moana or actually Moana Surfrider, Royal Hawaiian. All of these names that sound Hawaiian or are reflective of place names here, because that was the main clientele that was purchasing these items to take them home. So you have all of these beautiful, beautiful stories about the mixture of cultures of here in Hawaii: Hawaiian, Chinese, Filipino, Japanese. When we look back in time, you're going to find builders from each of those ethnic backgrounds. You're going to find amazing musicians. You're going to find store owners, retailers that were selling these. Oftentimes we don't think about the retailers. They were business people, but without people stepping into those spaces, the instrument would not have become as popular as it was. So it really takes a community. And that's what I love about this instrument. It's a reflection. It's kind of the manifestation of a community of people that resided in Hawaii, in the 19th century and into the 20th.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, you say I'm here in Sydney, we have 20 odd clubs in the sort of Sydney area. We had a lot of big international festivals. The Melbourne Ukulele Festival has had many incredible performers come from all over the world. I was sort of helpful in bringing the great Benny Chong over to Australia
Wow.
for a couple of tours, and he's still the only person to ever have got 2 standing ovations at the Melbourne Ukulele Festival.
He's remarkable.
He's
He really
incredible, yeah.
is.
He's the master, he really is.
Yes.
But yeah, as you say, it's just such a cross-cultural instrument, and
Hmm.
obviously, people around the world who are kind of in a way still seduced by the Hawaiian advertising of the 20s, the post Pan-Pacific Exposition.
Yes.
It might be the way they get into ukulele, but then I think people find that there's just so much to it. There's so much history and so much playability that they get entranced by it, and that's why it's
Absolutely.
a worldwide phenomenon now. It's incredible.
It really is. And I think it's not, the instrument is very inviting and it's not intimidating. Four string, much smaller, and the beautiful thing to me about this instrument is how, it's an instrument that is easy to play, but to master it, it can be extremely difficult. And then you watch people like Jake Shimabukuro and James Hill and Herbota Jr., of course, the great Benny Chong, and so many other people that are doing remarkable things around the world with the instrument. And you look at that and you think, wow, I can play a C chord with one finger, but at the same time, we have people playing Bach. Do you know the wonderful people over in Italy too, right? Giovanni Albini, and others that are offering, they have a bachelor's degree in ukulele. I
Yeah.
think this is fantastic, but they're transposing classical music, transposing that for the ukulele. And so it's another venue, another opportunity for people to embrace that instrument even further.
You say you started with the archives about 2.5 years ago. So what is
Yes.
your personal story? How did you get involved at that stage, and even before that? What sort of got you into the ukulele?
So I'm born and raised here in Hawaii, and I'm just a local boy, and I don't come from a music family. You go to your friend's place, and there's music and ukulele being played all the time. And of course, I noodled with ukulele, but it was really in my later years, in my college years. And so I went to school in Japan, three different universities in Japan, and while I was there, it was a point of reflection for myself, and just kind of questioning, who I am, where I'm from, because people don't ask you that in Hawaii. What do you do in Hawaii? But in Japan, everyone asks you, and it was a point of reflection for myself, and just an opportunity to think back of the things that I miss, and some things we take for granted, like the sun here sets over the ocean, but where I lived in Japan, it's set between the buildings. I was far from the ocean, so hearing the crashing waves, seeing the blue ocean, I could get there, but it would take some time. So all of those things kind of shaped my appreciation for home. And one of the sounds that I missed was the ukulele. And so I ended up buying this kind of lower end ukulele in Japan, and I would carry this thing around on campus with my backpack and books over one shoulder, and my ukulele gig bag over the other. And in between classes, I would just noodle and play around. And it's amazing. It never ceases to amaze me. But it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you have an ukulele, like people just walk up to you. And people just want to hang out and talk story and sing, or even smile walking by. There's something that is so beautiful about that instrument that just draws people together.
Hmm.
Such a social instrument. But for me, that was kind of really the starting point. And I came back to Hawaii, in between schools there, and I worked at one of the local ukulele stores here. That's where I met Jake and others, and then I moved into a managerial position. I managed. I went back to grad school, and long story short, I left that ukulele company. But then all my customers were still contacting me, and I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. But I just thought, wow, Hawaii's expensive. I love this instrument, and so I started my own company. And it's been about a little over 30 years now. I have been doing this. And I just decided that I just want to be in the spaces that I have the greatest interest,
Hmm.
and which is really high-end custom ukuleles, and then like museum grade, like collectible ukuleles. And the parallel between those two worlds, they're really similar in that they're both custom instruments, just from different time periods and different technologies. And so I wanted to be true to my greatest passion. That's the model that I have for Ukulele Friend. So when you look through all of the videos and all of the things that are online, you'll just see some of the coolest, rarest custom ukuleles from around the world. And at the same time, just some of the most outrageous historical ukuleles out there. And I'm really just a caretaker for these instruments. So I understand that I'm blessed to have these things, but it's important to me to educate. It's important to me to use these so that people can understand not only the history of the ukulele, but, for example, I have a builder friend that's over in Finland, and I think to myself, he's building ukuleles over there. Like, what kind of access to ukuleles does he have? And so creating some resources for builders such as that, where they can go and listen to an ukulele from the 1800s. What does an ukulele from that time period sound like? All of those things are being recorded and shared for those reasons. And
Hmm.
so that's really the model that I have. Some of my friends that own shops down here, I love them to death. They're super successful. They're fantastic. But jokingly, one guy in particular, he says, "You have a really bad business model." I said, business model. I said, "Why? What do you mean?" He said, "You sell these high-end ukuleles, then you buy these vintage ones, you fly around the world to repatriate them and bring them back to Hawaii, because that's part of what I want them here. And then you don't sell them. And he said, I don't know any business that does that. That's not, not a very successful business model. I said, well, it kind of depends on how you define success. If you define success in terms of outright sales and so forth, yes, that's maybe not the best model. But in terms of education, in terms of repatriating the instruments and using them for these purposes, I think this model works out quite well. And he said, yeah, I guess you got a good point. And so we often joke about that because he's big on history of ukuleles, and he's big on, he appreciates, and he has his own collection of vintage and ukuleles too. Yeah, so with for myself, it's been a long journey, but just a fantastic one. And the thing that I enjoy the most is I just value relationships. So I just really love connecting with people, and this instrument is really just allows me to make those genuine connections. If it were not for this instrument, like I wouldn't meet people certainly like you and so many others around the world that just love this instrument and play. And it's an opportunity for me to both educate, but I'm equally as excited to learn because there's so much to learn about not only about how it's being played, but the popularity or the trends in that country, or from builders. Like I don't build, but I have sat at builders at the, footstools of these people for, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours, just asking questions because I'm genuinely curious about building. And I want to share that because it's in me. Education is just in me.
Yeah.
So, and my full-time job, by the way, is I work for the university. So I work for the University of Hawaii at the community college, Kapi'olani Community College. So this world of ukulele is business, but for me, it's incomplete if it doesn't lack an educational component.
Mm.
It has to have an educational component, which also means not only teaching, but learning. There's this beautiful term in Hawaiian, this word called a'o, and it means both to teach and to learn. It's the same word. And I've always thought that that is such a beautiful, it's such a beautiful idea, beautiful concept, in that no matter how old you are and no matter how young you are both teaching and learning,
Mm.
always.
Well,
Yeah.
that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of the impetus behind this podcast. Is called Ukulele Stories because that's what it is. It's
Yes.
and everyone has a story, and it's always fascinating. And I used to run a magazine called Kamuk Ukulele Magazine, and I always had a history component because I'm with you. I always want to inform people as well as entertain them.
Yes.
And speaking of entertainment, I mean, you've got a bit of a partnership with some really great players like Brian Tolentino, who was just on the podcast, and Benny Chong, and others. How has that sort of informed what you're doing with Ukulele Friend and the archives?
It's such a blessing to know musicians, because without the musicians, we would never know the capability of what these instruments can do. And it might not nearly be as popular as a result of, people not wanting to pick them up because you don't have these amazing musicians. Likewise, the builders are also very, very important in this process, right? And so I really am blessed to know such a wonderful community of builders and so many people from around the world. The crazy thing is like I'm not a musician and I'm not a builder. And so when I first started doing this, before I met Adam, I have, a large collection of ukulele that, date back to the 1800s. And it is a bit nerve-wracking sometimes, right? Who can you trust? Who can you bring in? Who, and this and that. And everybody has been so kind, so respectful, and willing to share. And I genuinely believe it's on me because I'm not a musician, but I also want to afford musicians, and I can't do it with everyone, but afford select musicians opportunities to engage with their past by
Mm.
playing some of these instruments. And because I've had some very interesting sessions that are really one to one or one to two sessions, a couple of musicians come out and we'll record. And some of the comments in between, I wish I had captured in the recording, but it's a lot of self-reflection. It's like, wow, if the ukulele was not made, what would I be doing now? And there are people that are doing ukulele full time. And so it was a point of reflection. Or comments like, wow, imagine all of the parties or maybe the protests that these instruments played at, or look at the wear on these instruments. You can tell that the people played in these positions so much, and they begin to go on and say, wow, I wonder what songs they were playing, or where this instrument traveled, or who it was owned by. Or even on another level, I never thought of this. I think it was Herb Jr. that also made a comment once, and he came in and he said, this instrument in the key of G takes on a bigger personality than in other keys. And so we started talking a little bit, and he said, I wouldn't be surprised if we knew the history of this instrument, that its former owners were playing in a certain key more than other keys, because it sounded more open in one key than in other keys.
That's interesting.
And because over time, as you're playing that instrument, all of that energy that's being introduced into the strings, into the soundboard, into this, right, into this, the saddle and the bridge and the soundboard, you don't think about those things. But over, 140 years or so, the instruments themselves, over time, they are actually deteriorating. Just as we age, our bodies are also deteriorating. They deteriorate, but that cell structure, as it's loosening, it gives the instrument an openness and a flexibility that is unique to what it is. And so when you play in that key thousands of hours over 100+ years, it certainly has an impact on instruments. So having those musicians come in, and it's, once again, it's the concept of right? I'm inviting them into this space, and I'm excited to learn from them. But the other end of that is that the instrument itself, becomes a part of who they are, and causes them to reflect on their own identity, their own music, their own approach, their own style. And there are also some songs that just the instruments are like what we call kupuna, right? They are elders. There are, grandma and grandpa. There's some music, typically contemporary, that the instrument will tell you, sorry, Sonny, I don't play that music. But if you play something older or certain styles, the instrument is so bold, it stands up, and it is just remarkable. It's such a special experience. It's almost as though that person who built the instrument is in the room.
Yeah.
It's that kind of surreal kind of feeling.
Oh, that's fascinating. Amazing. Where did your personal collection start? What was the first sort of historic instrument that you acquired?
Wow. I wish I kept it. I came up on some hard times a little way through earlier on, but I had a Martin style one. It was refinished, but it was nice, and it was around the about 60s, right around there, 50s, 60s, and it just sounded and played great. A 1M, all mahogany, and I've just remembered just how amazing that sound was. I've always taken an interest in the history of these instruments, and so I quickly became friends with some of the big collectors on Oahu, and even those off of this island, because I was just so fascinated with the history and wanted to see examples. And during that time, it was really difficult to find any sort of images, documentation online. When the instruments would sell, they would be removed from the site. If you bookmarked them, they were gone. And so, for me, yeah, being able to kind of create that with the Ukulele Friend, so you have an archives page, but being able to kind of revisit and see the instruments and hear the sound, that's why I have the model that I do. But it was a style 1M soprano. And I remember I found it at a pawn shop, and it wasn't for sale. It was actually hidden. It was the shop owner's instrument, but it was kind of tucked away and hidden. And, he gave me a price, and I was like, oh man, it's more than I want to pay, but this thing sounds so good. And then I purchased that instrument. That's where it started for me.
Nice. I've got a soft spot for vintage Martins myself.
They're very special. Martins are fantastic.
My best story is a Martin 2K that I found actually in Sydney, and it's an export model. It was a music store that was going out of business. This guy had bought it in the 70s, always planned to clean it up and sell it, but then he just sold the shop, got too old, thought, forget about it, I'll get rid of it. And so I went straight round his house when I saw a grainy image on Facebook, and I thought that could be a Martin 2K. So I went straight over there, and sure enough, it was. Like, you couldn't see any of the purfler or anything. It was just filthy and no strings on it. I had no idea. And he kind of knew what it was, and he said, well, I could give it to you for, a few $100s or something. And I told him, don't give it to me for that. That's, if this is what it is, it's definitely more than that. And
Yeah.
so we actually came to an agreement, a little bit more than that, but not a huge amount. And all I did is clean it and string it up, and it's been my favorite instrument for a long time.
Oh, that's fantastic. The Koa models are amazing.
It's
and
beautiful. Early 20s.
Yeah, those instruments are so special.
They're so thin that I can't believe how thin the soundboards are, and those and the Nunez and such. Do you have a? Yeah, go on.
No, I was just going to ask: have you strung up your vintage ukuleles with genuine gut strings?
I haven't. No.
But you will love it.
I should.
It doesn't have it. Yes, everything at the State Archives. It's pre 1946.
Yeah.
And all of the ones in my collection too. Everything before 1946, we use genuine gut. Now, It doesn't have the punchiness and the projection as a modern day string, right? So pre 1946 is gut, and then they began to use nylon, and then in more recent times, fluorocarbon, Nile gut, and some of these other materials. Those strings, they just have take on a different personality. But these gut strings, I often wondered why classical guitarists often the purists really like these gut strings, because they can be finicky with temperature, right? Adjustments going into a colder climate or warmer. The micro adjustments, it takes a little bit more adjusting because it's a natural material. But the texture of the string is interesting because it gives a totally different feel. But the sound of the gut string is almost akin to kind of a warm hug. It doesn't have the big punch that other strings do, but it is what the Ali'i, or what the first ukuleles, what they really sounded like. Everything pre-46, 1946 is what they sounded like at the time they were sold. And so there's a warmth and there's an intimacy to them that is unique. So it depends on what you like. I think Aquila sells them online too, if you wanted to try some of those.
I'd love to try them.
I like it, yeah.
Yeah, my go-to is fluorocarbon at the moment, but I would love to try those. So Aquila, are there any other brands that you know of?
I think Aquila is the major one. It's a genuine gut string that they sell.
Okay.
I think they have them on Amazon. They're a bit pricey because they're natural material, but it is quite the experience. And what I love about it is it just kind of brings you back to an earlier time. Some of these older recordings are not that great, but you get a sense of what the music was, the ukulele originally sounded like, especially when you're playing those older Martins and so forth. They're all using those strings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to get some and I'll report back. Speaking of favorite instruments, do you have a favorite?
Oh my gosh.
Currently?
I have different types of favorite.
Yeah.
I mean, all the new instruments, I think they're fantastic, and I certainly have wood combinations and bracing patterns and builders because of the neck shape or the inlay work or the wood grain that are my favorites. But the historical ones, my gosh, very fortunate to have several Kingdom era ukulele from all original makers. And so I have, I'm the caretaker of as far as we know, the world's largest collection of Hawaiian Kingdom era ukulele. And so it's kind of like asking, which is your favorite kid? It's really a tough one to say, but in different styles and for different sound or different purposes, speaking purposes, I bring out different pieces based on to shape around what I'm trying to educate or speak on. And so there are certain ones that I'll take out for those reasons. That being said, my two most recent acquisitions are a whole nother level of craziness. I recently bought a 1928 Martin 3K concert, which is really rare. They only made 33 of those.
Concert. Very, very rare for Martin.
In Koa. Yeah, from that time period. They made 33 of those. And, as far as I know, in the collector community, I'm only aware of 4 or 5 of them. There are probably other examples that exist out there, but I'm only aware of a small number of them. And the other one that I was, looking at for a while, but I ended up buying a 1929 or 1930 Martin 5K tenor.
Wow. All right.
And that is crazy. It sounds so good. It sounds so good.
I'm not sure I was even aware they made a tenor in 5K.
They made, so the tenors for Martin, the first time they made tenors in 1928. So they made a 5K tenor. They made six of them in 1929. They made three of them in 1930, and then that was it. No more until about the 90s as special order. And then, of course, in the last few years, they've been making tenors and all kind of custom versions. But this instrument, it's a 12 fret joint to the body, but it is full curly koa, full shell inlay on the front and back. And what is crazy about this camera is this instrument comes out at the time of the Great Depression in Hawaii, in the
That's true.
United States.
Yeah.
This
Insane.
instrument cost about $75 at the time or so. Keep in mind that the plantation worker working in the plantation fields here in Hawaii was making 1929, according to the Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Labor, they were making 22 cents an hour for men, and then women were making 11 cents an hour. It's crazy.
I could buy this uke, or I could just not eat for 5 years. Yeah.
But I think what amazes me about this particular instrument, which is different from the Kingdom era instruments, is the Kingdom era instruments have their own unique personality. They're feather light. They have a huge projection. The Martin, by the time that they were making these ukuleles, they've been around for 90 to 100 years or so already, right? Making guitars. And so when they came into the scene, but the playability of Martins, as you well know with your 2K, the intonation is fantastic, the comfort of the instrument, the center balance, and so there's so much to be said about those instruments. And I think what I really love about having musicians come in too is, yes, some of these instruments and the technologies and intonation is off, but when you play these other instruments, keeping in mind when the instruments were made and where they were letting some of these imperfections go. So, for
Mm.
example, Kingdom era instruments, in the first 3, 4 positions or so, maybe 5, the intonation is not really an issue. It's when you get higher up in the neck. But at that
Mm.
time, these instruments are being made too. Nobody plays high on the neck at that time. Nobody knows what this instrument is. So as a seller or a retailer of these instruments, and maybe not getting things exactly dialed in all the time, maybe not as much of a concern because you don't have the musicians, you don't have the pushback, you have the creative freedoms to change the body shape and all these things. But then when you get into the Martins in particular, they're thriving in the mid 20s. They outsold in the 20s for like a year or two. They sold more ukuleles in that single year than they did for all the guitars ever made before that, like in a single year.
Incredible.
So it's pretty amazing. But the
Yeah.
intonation, the playability is all spot on with those Martins. Yeah.
How do you go about acquiring the instruments? How do you get the leads to find them?
I mean, I've been in the collector community for a very long time because when I first started, I was interested in just learning about them. I could never afford them. And so I knew a lot of these collectors, and they were kind enough to invest in me time and show me what these instruments are and teach me about them. And, over time, been fortunate to, do okay in my business and set some funds aside. But sometimes it comes on eBay. Usually it doesn't, but sometimes it'll show up in a place like that, but usually not because most of these heavy hitting instruments go between collectors. They're sold between collectors most of the time. The 5K Martin tenor is a good example. It's a collector. He's a huge guitar collector that fell in love with ukulele too. And he had that instrument for, 25, 30 years. And so those type of instruments, you actually kind of know the lineage, whose collector hands it's passed through.
Mm.
Other times people just email me, I have these things, and I'm always happy to just give information. But yeah, sometimes they'll come in a whole bunch of different ways. And as you can imagine, these instruments are not cheap.
Well, I
And so
know.
like, I look at this and I think, like how understanding my wife is.
That's saying something. Yeah, for sure.
Oh my gosh, I'm spending all of this money on all of these ukuleles and not selling them. But she trusts me and, she believes in what we're doing for the community as well as believes in me. And so, but obviously, like the 5K tenor and the cost of things like that, you can buy a brand new car and then some.
Yeah.
Like we talk about those ones, but everything else, it's not that she needs to hear that from me. Sometimes just me needing to share that.
Yep.
Like, this is,
Should we do this?
she, yeah, she always says, well, what do you think?
Well, obviously you think yes. Of
But
course we
the
should.
funny thing is like, she's so nice and so giving and so loving. And I want to involve her in this. And she trusts me and she knows that that I trust her and she trusts me. But I want to share this with her. And so she'll take the time to listen and so forth. But it's almost as though I'm giving a presentation to myself because she sometimes I think believes in me more than I do myself. So
That's a good person to have.
yeah.
You say you're not a musician, but what do you enjoy playing when you pick up a uke?
Wow, that's a great question. I am one of those guys that I'm so heavy on the education side that I don't play too much. I like noodling and playing around. And so when people are playing, I like to pick an instrument up and just kind of join in and play and learn. But I have really been enjoying just Hawaiian music more recently. And part of that is because I don't come from a music background in music family. I recognize a lot of the songs, but I didn't know the names of the songs or the pronunciation of the songs because it's in Hawaiian. And so I thought, I need to learn in this area. And so I asked my musician friends, and they're kind to show me. I'm taking Hawaiian language classes at the university now because I want to know how to break down sentence structure and I want to know how to say certain things. And I want to be able to look back at some articles that are written in Hawaiian and other languages. I'm not trying to be fluent, but I just want to have
Mm,
certain tools to be able to do research on my own, ask questions to the right people, and have a network, a community that I can go to when I need assistance,
mm,
as well. But yes, Hawaiian music, I would say, and more traditional, like older
mm.
kind of Hawaiian music. I love Hawaiian slack key too.
Same.
And people often ask me, what instrument do you like? All of these instruments, what do you play the most? I have to tell you, one of the instruments that I always go to is actually not an ukulele. I have several Kamaka guitars, but there's one Kamaka guitar in particular that has a really deep V'd neck. And this instrument is so special. I mean, it is like a wild horse. The sound is so big that if you play it in a small room, it feels constrained. It's like a stallion that wants to go running wild in open fields. But I love, playing that guitar. In recent times, I have been playing that 5K tenor, and of course, I those Kingdom period instruments. I love taking those things out because they just have their own very unique tonal personality to them.
Mm, mm.
But I think that's the beauty of ukulele is that there's so many different shapes. There's so many different, even more modern times, bracing styles, different approaches, different thicknesses. It's the only instrument I know that can have so many different types of colors and shapes and
Yeah.
different materials and yet still be called an ukulele and still
Mm.
be loved and embraced by a community all around the world. Like I don't know of any instrument that has taken on so many different forms and still be called that same instrument and
Yeah.
still be loved and embraced and played. Yeah, I think that's what, once again, it's a reflection of what the ukulele is, a community of people, a worldwide community of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as an historian and an
Mhm.
educator, what's one historical fact, uke fact, that every player should know?
Wow. One historical fact that every youth player should know. I would say that when we think of historical ukuleles, we often think of, most people would describe an ukulele that looks like a kumalai,
Mm,
which means it has a crowned headstock, right? 3-point crown headstock. It has no fingerboard and it's made of all koa.
mm-hmm.
That is an old ukulele, but the first generation ukuleles actually had softwood tops, specifically fir wood, and they had fingerboards, and they had bridge pins, and the headstocks were not three crowned, three pointed, they were figure eight shaped. And
Mm,
so you have this evolution of this instrument through a whole bunch of influences. We believe, for example, there are business influences on the evolution of the ukulele. So the removal of the fingerboard, for example, you went from an extended fingerboard that looks like a style 3 Martin, where you 17 frets to the sound hole. That's what the first generation ukuleles looked like. They had that fingerboard extension, but nobody plays higher up on the neck. right? You have no skilled players.
Yeah.
There's more materials involved, right?
Much
Frets
more
as
difficult.
well as wood. So, from a business perspective, not having a fingerboard means more efficient, less materials, higher profits. And so, same thing with the bridge pins. Instead of having pins, why not notch it and then
Mm.
slide the string at the base? Less materials, quicker production, and more profits, right? So, those types of things, to know that the earliest ukuleles were patterned after the parent instruments, which all had softwood tops. And then, through geographical influences, business influences, political influences. I was talking to Jim about this as well, and he's doing some super interesting research, as he always is. But the crowned headstock shows
Mm.
up shortly after the overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom. And
Oh.
so, why crowned? Now, on the business side, it's a heck of a lot easier to cut two straight lines and then notch out the top. So, it's
Yep.
much faster from a business perspective than make a figure eight or a fancy, kind of headstock. So, that's one possibility. But we also think that it might be partly due to the fact that the early makers were showing solidarity with the Hawaiian kingdom and against the overthrow.
A form of resistance, really.
And why koa wood, right? Same thing.
Mm.
There's so many other woods here, but koa was prized, and at one point, in the mid 1800s or so, I mean, it was it's kapu, right? It's you can't use that wood unless you are of royalty.
Mm.
But those things were released over time, and eventually they were used for furniture and all kinds of things by common or affluent people. And it was a prized wood by the monarchy, but also prized by the commoners, the Hawaiians, as well as everyone in the community. And so we don't know for sure, but we also suspect that's another reason why it's all koa and not, monkey pod, which we
Mm.
have a lot of and it's very cheap,
Mm.
or coal, or, mango wood, of which we have a lot, or even sandalwood.
Well, again, absolutely fascinating. Final question then. I often ask this. I say I often ask this. I probably always ask this, but what does the ukulele mean to you? And in your case, what does the ukulele mean to Hawaii? And is it the same answer?
Well, that's a great question. To me, the ukulele really, and I mentioned this earlier, is a representation of our community. First in Hawaii, and what was happening in the late 1800s, early 1900s, but even contextually now, it is a beautiful representation of the tapestry of people around the world. That's really what the ukulele is to me, is that it doesn't matter of what ethnic background or what place you call home, what country you're from, what language you speak. The ukulele embraces all of that, and historically as well. It's all throughout history. All of these stories of people from around the world, their stories are intertwined with that instrument in
Mm.
such a beautiful way. And for me, being from Hawaii, you know, it's very common for me to ask any of my friends down here, hey, what ethnicity you? And you hear them rattle off sometimes one or two. It's pretty uncommon. Ones or twos are a little less common here in Hawaii, but it's very common. 5, 6, 8, 10 different ethnicities. That's what the ukulele really represents to me, is it's that all of these cultures, for us here in Hawaii, and how we all live in harmony, and how we all champion one another's strengths and abilities, and how we celebrate them together. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think the ukulele around the world is so popular. It's not that the ukulele people are learning Hawaiian songs around the world. Many people are taking that instrument and playing folk songs from their own communities, which I think is a beautiful thing. But that also is a representation of the very kind of fabrication of, or this mixture of community or mixture of cultures that we're talking about. It's just happening on a much bigger scale now.
Mm.
And I think that's what's so beautiful about this instrument. It's really the reason why I fell in love with this instrument, even though I am from Hawaii, is because I see myself in this instrument. My father is from New Jersey, Italian. My mother is from the neighbor island, Kauai, Filipino, but I speak Japanese. So I'm a Hawaii born, Japanese speaking Filipino Italian kid. that's an example of the ukulele,
Yeah.
and I think that's really why I love this instrument, and I love the fact that people are doing so much that as you are to share about this instrument and to invite other people to play this instrument and just to have fun. I think that's the beauty of this instrument.
Well, that is a good way to end it, I think. So thanks so much for taking the time to chat to me. It's been a real pleasure to meet you. And yeah, thank you for all you're doing for the instrument.
Well, thank you, Cameron. And thank you for all you're doing to share these stories with your listeners and to reach out to amazing musicians and bring them in, like Uncle Benny and Brian Tolentino and so many others. I genuinely believe, that we all have an important role in sharing the joy and the fun of this instrument. And your work is very, very important to that, as is our friends in Europe, as is our friends in Japan and across the continental US. We all play a very important role in championing this instrument. One, just to bring healing to the soul, just music heals. But two, you can have so much fun with the ukulele. And the cool thing is it doesn't need to be super complex. You can explore this instrument as far as you want or as minimally as you want. But both ends of that spectrum, you will have so much fun. And I think that both you and I know that. And so my hope is that your viewers will that are thinking about getting involved in ukulele and so forth, you don't have to get an expensive ukulele. You just have to pick one up and just play in fun and have some fun and then go from there. And you're just going to meet the most amazing people, and it's going to open a whole bunch of doors. And that's the beauty of this experience. So thank you for all your work as well.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you again. And I would also encourage all the listeners to go to Ukulele Friend, even just to look at the website and look at the museum section on there and all the incredible instruments you've got. Even if you can't afford one, as you say, get a cheap one if you're just starting out. But it won't be long before you're looking at Ukulele Friend with different eyes, one eye on the wallet. Thanks so much, Shawn. Aloha,
Thank
and
you.
yeah, well, hopefully we can meet in person one day.
Yes, absolutely. Let's keep in touch. Thank you so much, Cameron.
Cheers. Bye. Thanks for listening to Ukulele Stories. To take us out, I have a very special treat for you. Shawn was kind enough to provide me with an audio clip of talented Hawaiian musician Mika Kane trying out the 1929 Martin 5K he spoke about in our interview. It gives us a fascinating glimpse into the amazing work Shawn and his colleagues are doing, and it's also a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you keep on smiling and keep on strumming.
Hey guys, Mika here, and this might be one of my, up to this point, one of my most favorite moments here at Ukulele Friend, holding this ukulele right here. I played lots and lots and lots and lots of fancy custom instruments, some of the best on the planet. I played quite a few vintage instruments here. It's just really a lot going on over here at Ukulele Friend, and it's one of those times where I get the text or get the call, hey, we need to do some sound samples, and I got a treat for you. And here's one of those treats that I have the honor and pleasure of holding in my hands. For those of you who might not know, Martins back then were the absolute peak or pinnacle of instruments, especially the earlier ones. To give some context, I was very fortunate because I grew up being able to play a tenor. Kind of, I think, early 1960s mahogany model. So I kind of had an idea of what a tenor Martin from the golden era before it kind of switched over to the newer stuff today. But so I got to play that, and I always thought like, wow, 1960, like, or whatever, 1962, like, wow, this sounds great. Like the intonation, the playability. And that was me growing up, and I was like in high school and stuff, and I was thinking already like, wow. And for me to be a professional musician nowadays with more life experience, more playing experience, I have a pickier ear, and I look for specific things when I'm playing instruments. This is phenomenal. I went off a little off tangent right there, but I'll come back to it. This is a phenomenal playing or player instrument. But again, to come back to the rarity of this, this is a Martin tenor 5K model. So model 5, which is the creme de la creme, that's the highest model pretty much you can get. K meaning koa, the koa model. They made mahogany and koa models. And then because this is a model 5, I mean, this is decked out to the moon. So essentially you have shell inlay wrapped around the body, around the rosette. you have this really awesome, inlay here on the top of the headstock. Beautiful curly coil again on the front, all over the headstock. But shell on the back. This is a 1929 model, and having ukulele just decked out back then with the shell on the back and on the front. Martin 5K tenor 1929 model. To give some context, even I didn't know. Well, first of all, there's only 9 of these made. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out where to go with this because there's so much exciting information with this. But there's only 9 of these made ever in the world, and I have the privilege of holding one right here, not behind a glass, not read in a book, right here in hands, or not for me not me specifically, but I think in the right hands in terms of it's meant to be in a player's hands. I think this kind of instrument, it's really awesome that a player gets to play it and let it tell its story. This is trying to tell its story from back then, right? There's only 9 of these made. One of them is here, and to be honest, again, growing up, I had the privilege of playing a mahogany model. I think it was just a basic, maybe it was a 1M model or a basic model. So I already thought that was awesome, but my dad would tell me like, oh, the top of the top stuff, if you ever have the chance, one day if you make it big or whatever, you should keep your eyes out on a Martin 5K. But it's a soprano. I'm like, oh, okay. So I've seen pictures of Martin 5K soprano, so I was kind of aware. And apparently now there's a lot more soprano sizes than the tenor size. But I didn't even know a concert or tenor size existed. So when I got the text, to come in to do sound samples, and Mika, I have a tenor 5K. I'm like, they make those? And that's when I learned that there's only 9 of these. And then again, one being over here. And then, took it out of the case and tuned it up. And I was just like, like, wait, what? This is like in amazing condition. Just even like the fretboard, it's like still shiny. I mean, it's like it wasn't even played that much. I mean, yeah. So, playing it and just trying to I was like how crazy, like the playability, the cleanliness, the intonation, the tone, thinking that this instrument's almost 100 years old. This instrument has opened up over the almost century that it's it was made ago. Make sure it's in tune before I play something. I mean, just listen to the, I don't know if the microphones can. This sounds like an instrument made today, but like, I mean, try to listen to this. Feel the resonance. How clean it is. It's phenomenal. I mean, for me as a player, I mean, again, to put myself in the shoes of, this was made in 1929. Me playing, like, if I picked up this instrument now, it's like, oh, okay, cool, like an older vintage instrument. One of my first things I would think of, like, playability wise, but like, wow, this feels great. Oh yeah, by the way, it was made 100 years ago. Just thinking like, wow, like, to think that if you transported me back and I couldn't take something from the present back and I could play something like this, I'll be so honored to play, or be happy to play something like this, because it just sounds so great. It plays great. The intonation, like the fact that there's even like nice sustain or vibrato. Such a big sound too, like such a koa sound too. Mid-range, sweet sound. is a harmonic. It's quite the honor. Again, I never take for granted that I get to be here, ukulele friend, and just be able to play stuff like this. So with that, I'll stop yapping and let's try to make some music on this. Here we go. So nice. You gotta keep this in. Oh my gosh. That's classic.
That's awesome.